Good afternoon and welcome back to part 4, I believe, of our mole shooter extravaganza. Today we are going to be focusing on part 4, which as mentioned in part 3, we are going to be adding the rest of the bitmaps to the application and pop in a couple of signs up onto the display. All pretty straightforward after part 3. If you followed in part 3, then this part will be fairly straightforward. So without further ado, the first thing that you want to do is to get onto the internet and Google and search for some signs. Find a sign to your liking. Okay, so if you look at my resources, open folder, where are we? There we go. And have a butchies in there. You will see I have a sign here, a wooden sign. Let's preview. There we go, with some text on it. Well, I've added the text to the sign. I also had to extend this sign down, so in Photoshop because the sign wasn't tall enough, so I essentially cut some of the planks off this sign and stuck them on the bottom of the sign to make the sign longer so that I could get all 4 words on there. We've also got a picture frame here. Let's pop that up. There you go. So this picture frame again was taken off internet. It was actually a mirror, I think. Was it a mirror or was it a picture frame? Can't remember. But anyway, again, put it into Photoshop, gave it a background, turned it into a bit of a signpost or notice board, billboard, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, the splat, blood splat, and the target site, again, all 4 of them Googled. So if we get Google back up here, you'll see here I've got the blood splats, so you can grab any old blood splat you like, preferably one that's free, lol, and gun sites. Now when you download these gun sites, the chances are that the background will be white or opaque and you need to remove the background. Now if you go to my part 3 tutorial, in there you will see that we had to remove the background from the mole, and the process is exactly the same for the sites and the signs. You just load them up into Photoshop and remove the background in exactly the same way. Okay, so just a quickie, we're in Photoshop here and you can see my sign. This was the original sign and this was the sign when I'd finished with it, and as you can see we've extended the sign down and we've added some text to it. Now we've only got 3 words on there, we obviously need 4, so this is an incomplete sign. To get your text on there, if you don't know how to use Photoshop or whatever, then obviously piece of cake. Well, I say obviously a piece of cake, it's not obviously a piece of cake unless you've done it before, but anyway. Get your text tool over here on the left and make sure that you've got type mask tool selected, and then type onto the sign. Obviously there's more than one way you can do this, you just need to get text onto the sign, you can do it anyhow, but I basically wanted to get that burnt wood effect, so the way I did it was to type obviously my sign text using the as I said, the horizontal type mask tool, and then we move the text around until we're happy with its location. Okay, and you can also go up here to the top of the screen and change the size of the font to a size that you like or prefer, yeah, if it works. Not in this particular case. There you go. Okay, and then come down here to the burn tool and just burn the wood in. You can see there, okay, and that makes it a little bit darker and you get that nice burnt effect. Again, the background, you can see I've already removed the background. It's easy enough to do. Like I say, just either draw a marquee around the sign, contract the sign so that you get rid of any blemishes or any halo effect from the background, invert the mask and delete, and you should hopefully be left with your sign. Okay, so anyway, you would save that into your resources folder. You don't want to save that. And this is my resources folder, and you can see in here obviously we've already got our sign. So the next task is to get the sign, the rest of these bitmaps into the application. Okay, so as demonstrated in previous series, or previous parts to get the resources into your resource tree on your Solutions Explorer or your project. Remember, it's projects, mold shooter properties, resources, add resources. Sorry, drop down the menu, add existing file. Then go to your resources folder and select your resource. So we want to add our wooden sign, our splat, our site, and our frame. Incidentally, I'm not going to go through the process of editing these 3 images in Photoshop, the splat, the site, and the score frame. I think you know enough now to be able to edit these yourself. Like I said, the only thing you need to do really is remove the background and rescale the images accordingly. That's really it. Yeah, remove the background so that it becomes transparent. Possibly doctor some of these a little bit, like the sign with the text and the frame with the background here. We added a light wooden effect to the frame. So really not much in the way of editing. Okay, so anyway, select all 4 of those and click open, and these are now automatically added to our resources folder. We can rename these accordingly, so we'll call this one score frame, site, splat, and sign, I think. Okay, so that's it. So that's the loading and the renaming of the, or adding to the resources folder done. So we'll save that. Now the next thing obviously is to implement the code for these bitmaps. Now that's pretty straightforward. Remember we discussed yesterday when we added Michael the mole, we created a base class, CImage base. Well, we're going to be using CImage base for all of the rest of the bitmaps in this application, and we won't be animating these bitmaps. Therefore, we do not need to add any custom functions to the sign classes, or to the splat class, or to the score frames class, etc. Okay, so we do need to obviously add a parent class which will manage the bitmaps. Or the unique bitmaps, obviously. So like I say, remember we had this base bitmap or char bitmap. So I just knocked this quick flowchart up here to show you, or block diagram to show you roughly what I'm talking about with regards to base and parent classes. So this base class here, remember, was the base class that we created in part 3, and let's get the code screen up. Here, remember this base class, image base, which basically managed all the drawing and the garbage disposal of the bitmap. That's this base class here, and then we essentially created a mole parent class which inherited these properties, which basically meant we could use the drawing functions within this base class, within this mole class. Well, we need to do something similar now with the signs and the splat, the target signs, etc. So we're going to create these parent classes, but like I said, because we're not going to be animating these signs in the same way that we animated the mole, we don't need to support the coordinate system. Okay, so by coordinate systems I mean the current position. We will need an X and a Y, but the X and the Y locations and the width and the height are obviously stored in the base class, so we don't need anything additional inside the sign and the splat classes. Okay, so to get those classes into your project, you select your parent folder name from the Solutions Explorer here, Mole Shooter, right click that and add your class, then give it a class name, something sensible, remember. So we're going to create a class sign. We're also going to create class splat, so add where are we, class splat, and add class what do we need here, score frames, score frame, and is that it? So score frame, sign, splat. I believe that's it for the moment. Now remember, we are inheriting from our base class C image base, and we need to do that now for all of these newly formed or newly created classes. And then in here we need to pass into the base class as constructor the actual image that we want to display on the screen. We also need to make this method publicly available outside of this class, so we are going to give it the public prefix followed by the class name, which is csign, and then the base class, some parentheses in here followed by resources, which doesn't currently exist in our references at the top here, but we'll sort that out in a minute just by going up and adding shoot properties, period, actually mole shooter, I believe, properties, there we go, that's it. Period. Why can't we see anything? Right, what have we done here? Oh, there we go. That's better. Okay. Dot. And then you can see, obviously, in here we have, again, all our images, and we have a multitude of images this time. We have all of our images. Now, clearly, we just want the sign. So we'll tab that, and there we go. Press semicolon to terminate the line. Actually, what am I talking about? Curlies to terminate the line, and that's it. Done and dusted. Save that, and now we can copy and paste that line to our other classes here. Remember to add the mole shooter property or the using reference up here to your using lines. We'll put it down the bottom here just for convenience sake, and we want to change this from c.sign to splat. Now we can't see the drop down list box. The reason for that, obviously, we haven't renamed our constructor here to csplat, so easy mistake to make. Excuse me. Make a change there. Now press appear, and now you can see the drop down with all your with all your images, and we want splat this time. So it's worth bearing in mind, if you're not that familiar with the IDE or the Visual Studio IDE, that if there's an error in the line, then your IntelliSense will not work correctly. So anyway, splat, there's the constructor splat, that's that one done. Again, we'll copy this and we'll move this to the score frame class, and we'll paste that in there. Rename the constructor to score frame, add the mole shooter properties, so I'm just copying and pasting to save a bit of effort. And then down here, press the period key and add in your score frame. That, my friends, is it. So we'll save all of those. So now we can get rid of those tabs. Back to the source code for the parent class, which is obviously the form. Remember over here in the Solutions Explorer, select your main form, right click it if you don't already have your code up, and press View Code, and that will show you your code screen. Now in here we need to essentially construct those classes that we just created and set up all of the coordinates where we want those placing on the screen. Okay, so up here inside your main or global inside the main class, so come inside the class but don't go inside the function. You need to create your csplat, and then we'll give that one underscore name of splat. That's our blood splat, if you didn't already know. And then we'll have csign, and we'll have underscore sign. Did I spell that right? I think I did, yes. And lastly but not least, the score sign. So C score sign. Where are we? What are we doing here? C score sign. Score frame even. And the score, and we will call this the underscore score frame. Save that. Now, to save a bit of time, I am going to paste in the constructor code, which basically creates the objects for these and passes in the coordinates and the dimensions, okay, for the new objects. So up here, sign equals new sign, and we set the left coordinate to 340 and the top coordinate to 30, so that's actually going to place the sign top left hand side of the screen. Mole, see mole, we've already done the mole, so we're not going to go through that again. The frame, score frame, store it top left, 10 pixels in from the top of the screen and 10 pixels from the top of the screen. Save that. It's useful to note that we are only using the coordinates here, for example, on left and top, and if you need to get access to any of the other properties, we can obviously assign those later on in the game. So for example, splat, you notice we're not actually passing in the left and the top coordinates, and you might be asking yourself, well, why not? Well, if you think about it, the game itself is all about shooting a mole, and when you hit that mole, the mole goes splat. Now remember, the mole is moving around the screen, which basically means that we need to track the mole's position, and when we hit the mole, we need to hit or place the splat on top of the mole, so the mole splat will move throughout the game. So we don't know what it is up front, so later on we'll actually be updating the splat coordinates as we go along. So if you type the splat object name and then select a period, you can see inside here we've obviously got the left and the top coordinates that we can assign to at any time. Okay, so that's why we don't initialize those now. So lastly but not leastly, or lastly but not least even, we wish to obviously place these onto the screen. So we've got them into the game now, we've got them into the application proper, so they're in the resources folder and we've got the code implemented. Now there's a couple of lines of code left to put on the screen, and those are the lines which actually draw these signs to the screen. We obviously don't want to put a splat on the screen just yet because we haven't splattered our mole. However, when we do, the process will be exactly the same, and we will do that in a later tutorial when we come to do the gun and the hit tests, etc. on our mole. So come into the onPaint function, okay, create yourself a new line and enter the drawing mechanism, which is essentially the same for the mole draw image DC. The only difference being obviously we prefix our line with splat, sign, score frame, etc. and not mole. So we'll do the sign. Okay, so we'll copy the sign logo up here because I'm a lazy typer, and we need to put this below the declaration for the graphics DC because obviously we're going to be using the device context to draw to. Now sign period, remember, now draw image, and inside of draw image we pass the device context, close that off, semicolon, that's it. That will now put the sign on the screen. Do the same again now for score frame. Okay, so score frame, pick it out of the IntelliSense, period, again, draw image, parentheses, pass in the device context, shut it down with a, close it off with a semicolon, that's it, save that. Now, moment of truth, let's start the thing up and hope for the best. Now, as you can see here, boom boom, we've now got our sign on the screen and we've got our scoreboard on the screen. How sweet is that, eh? Only took us 20 minutes, but it was worth it. So I think for now, because of the time, 20 minutes is long enough, and I think you guys probably get a little bit itchy after 20 minutes. I know I certainly would. And I think it's easy to follow along as well with these tutorials if I break them down into specific component parts dealing with disciplines such as graphics or audio, mouse movement and hotspots, etc. So I hope you agree, and if so, great, let me know. If not, again, let me know, and I can always change the format. But for this time, I think I'm going to leave the clicking or the hotspot detection mechanism for this sign until another video, part 5, I believe, and where we'll go over the cursor or mouse click and hotspot detection. So we're going to create some rectangles around the start, stop, reset and quit, and we'll detect when the mouse is within these regions, and from that we'll be able to identify the region and stop the game accordingly, or reset and quit the game. Okay, so we'll take that up in the next part. So until then, guys, thanks for being patient, and thank you for staying with me, and I will see you in part 5. So till then, take care for now.